Green screen. Yeah, we're live. 7:08. 7:08. So if you guys haven't, please take a look at the video that I posted today on What's It Worth, part one of a million. I don't know how many I'm going to do. We're going to do a bunch because there's a lot of good information. So I wanted to talk about on the throttle body side. I thought it was interesting because I thought I would get a lot of questions about this. I haven't checked Facebook and Instagram yet about the promos for the video because I advertise the videos, as promotions on Instagram and Facebook so that people, to direct traffic over to the video. And I haven't checked those yet. So maybe there'll be some comments on there about, because the photo that I used for the thumbnail was actually the intake manifold for the V12 LS. I haven't done anything with that for a long time. I'm hoping, I don't know. We'll see what happens with all of that. But the reason I did it is because it had good throttle body photos. Those were kind of the best ones that I had that I hadn't used extensively over and over again. And so I wanted to try to use something that hadn't been employed yet. And so I thought that was good. And I thought that I would get comments about that because it wasn't about obviously that particular motor. It was more about throttle bodies and throttle body upgrades and what happens when we do that stuff. And the interesting thing is, and we could get into a lot more detail here on the throttle body side of it, because what I did was we showed that on, it shows the things that we talk about because we use logic here, that when the throttle body is already big enough for the power output that it has, that the motor is making, there's no gain. When it's not enough, then you get good gains. The interesting thing, and you can get the nuances here, and you could talk about the fact, and I did mention in the video that on blow-through applications where you have a turbo, just don't worry about the throttle body or a vortex, centrifugal supercharger, or procharger, torque storm, whatever. If you're blowing into the throttle body, don't worry about the throttle body size. Just blow through what you have, and it'll be fine. Just like keep the stock heads, keep the stock intake manifold. You can make a bajillion horsepower, and then if you want to go racing and you want to do other things, then you could talk about changing the intake manifold. And then also with throttle bodies, forget about the gains that you get. The throttle body size should be the same as the opening in the manifold. Excuse me, in the manifold. You should try to match that. It's better. You can run smaller ones, especially as blow-throughs. But part of the problem, and one of the reasons that I got asked why, and I've been asked this question a number of times. In fact, from way back when I first posted that video of the 600 horsepower 383 buildup, because I did a lot of tests along the way. We probably tested 15 different things along the way while that motor was getting built up. It was just a motor that we used for testing, but we kept adding more and more things to it. So one of the questions I got is, why didn't you? it's always, why didn't you? I kind of lost my train of thought. Why didn't I do what? Why didn't we test a stock throttle body like on the fast manifold? I'm like, well, we could, but we'd have to have some kind of adapter to neck that thing down. Now, maybe ICT Billet had it. They had it going the other way, where we put the 3-hole, standard truck manifold throttle body, the 3-bolt deal, and then going out to the 4-bolt, and we put a 92 on there. Putting a 102 on there would just be ridiculous because the 92 didn't do anything on the truck manifold anyways. And the reason that it didn't is because you're tapering it out to a bigger throttle body, but going back into the size of the hole of the opening of the intake manifold. And actually, if you look really closely, there's some really good information here that I didn't go over. But in one of the photos that I included is when I cut the truck manifold in half, so we could look and see what's going inside there. And if you look in there, the flow orifice, the opening of that, gets even smaller than the throttle body is. So going bigger and bigger outside of that, less and less of a gain. So that naturally, and particularly on the 4.8, on a 5.3, maybe we'd have a little bit more luck with the throttle body size. On a 6.0, maybe a little bit more luck. But we're still stuck, at least in stock trim, with that same early truck manifold, which would have come on most of those, particularly the early ones. And then later on, we had the Trailblazer SS, which has a bigger, 90 millimeter size opening. And so we could put a 92 on there. And honestly, the 92 or the 90, depending on whether you're doing a drive-by wire or the of the cable operated ones, the mechanical ones, that will feed a lot of power. And even if you did, so you wouldn't, I don't think you'd ever want to put a 102 on there, because you have the same thing that you have on the truck manifold, putting a bigger throttle body on the early truck manifold. The opening in the manifold just isn't big enough to support that. So yeah, you could run a 102 on a Trailblazer SS, but why would you? The opening already necks down to 90 or 92. So I don't recommend that. I do recommend running a 102 on a fast, but if we neck the fast down to a 78 millimeter throttle body, for instance, we went the other way, went from the 4-hole down to the 3-hole, or just did a 4-hole version of a 78 millimeter throttle body, we certainly would see a change in power. But and here's where the nuance would come in. Here's where the interesting test, I think, would come in. And in fact, this will be our poll here. Okay, would a 78 to 102 throttle body upgrade on a 600 horsepower NA motor gain the same power as a 600 horsepower TVS blown motor? So if they're both making 600 horsepower, and we basically, this is what I'm asking. It's maybe not evident there, but I want to make it evident for the poll. If we did a throttle body test, 78 versus 102 on a 600 horsepower NA motor, and did it on a 600 horsepower blown motor, would we gain the same power on both of them? You guys let me know. Let me know what you think. But, and the point was that, yeah, if we, to do a throttle body test on a fast manifold like that, like on the 383, we would have had to artificially neck down that thing, which we'd be doing with the throttle body kind of anyway. But we would have had to done an adapter to go from that 102 millimeter opening down to the 78 millimeter opening. And then hopefully from the 78 millimeter opening, it'd have some kind of taper. And ideally that spacer would be, thick, so that it could be long, so the taper could be smooth. And that would be better, I think. But you're still necking it down to 78 millimeters. And so you would see a change in power from doing that. The question is, would you see the same kind of thing that we saw putting that small throttle body on a TVS blower versus putting it on, going to the 102 on a TVS blower? Do we get the same kind of gain if we're talking about a 600 horsepower NA motor and a 600 horsepower blower motor? Do we get the same kind of gain from that throttle body upgrade? Because we know that the gains that you get are related to the amount of flow required to make that power. So 600 horsepower requires a certain amount of airflow. If the 78 millimeter throttle body isn't able to flow that, then it's going to lose power. If the 102 is able to, it's going to gain power. And it's the same thing with the blower application. The same thing NA, same thing blown. Let me know what you guys think about that on the poll. Let me know. But good stuff. And that's what I'm saying, that on these what's it worth videos, there's a lot to talk about, and a lot of stuff that kind of has to get glanced over. For instance, blowing through the throttle body, with a turbo or blower thing, I just casually mentioned that. I said, look, don't change the throttle body. You're good. If you're forcing air through it, the flow rate goes up dramatically. You're not going to restrict it. It would be interesting, again, to go into like the minutia part of this and go into detail and go, okay, look, at what point where we're forcing air past that throttle body, do we see, a pressure drop across that throttle body, and not a pressure drop in the intake manifold? We got to do it right before and after the throttle body. And the intake manifold, like a truck intake manifold, does that become restrictive also at some point? And you'd have to pressure tap everything and find out, oh, look, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing that. The other thing that happens is, and this is going into the other whole different kind of detail here, is that if you gain power from the intake manifold, the power that you gain from the intake manifold might not be flow related. It might not be that one manifold flows more than the other. The runner length is a perfect example of that. If we gained a bunch of power because we have the right runner length in the RPM range that we're running, we gain power. It's not that it flows more there. In fact, it probably doesn't. A long runner manifold probably does not flow more than a short runner manifold, and yet it makes a whole bunch more power there. Would we see a change in pressure because we're now making more power, irrespective of the flow of the manifold? And this is what I'm talking about. This is the wonderful dynamic equation that is the internal combustion engine. And it's a lot of things like this that people just don't grasp. Like most people grasp flow. They're like, oh yeah, heads flow a lot and they make a lot of power. Yeah, but that's not the whole thing. Same thing with an intake manifold. And to some extent, same thing with throttle body. A throttle body's a lot more of a simple air door. But when we're blowing through it, when does it become a problem? Pretty easy to see when it becomes a problem as you're drawing through it. Like if you put it in front of the blower, or which I didn't do on the Metro. We were blowing into that throttle body, which is probably not ideal with the supercharger on the dyno. So, what are you going to do? But it would have been better to have the throttle body on the other side of it. But when you're doing that, you've got to look at all that stuff. And it's pretty easy. If the throttle body is on the inlet side of the blower, you could just see if there's vacuum there, just if you have some kind of intake manifold or anything that you could pressure tap and go, oh yeah, on that throttle body at this power level, look, we're seeing 3 inches of vacuum. It's just way too small. Or you just put a bigger one on there and go, hey, look, we picked up 30, 40, 50 horsepower, whatever, like we did in the video when we were doing that Tom DeMuse Ford blower on the LS. I know that made some of the Chevy guys mad, which is just kind of silly. With a 78 to 102 throttle body upgrade on a 600 horsepower NA motor, gain the same horsepower as a 600 horsepower TVS blown motor. Most of the people are saying no. V12 sideways. That's right. That's it. Oh, my thumbnail is sideways. That's right. George is in the house. I have a facility in Georgia. Oregon's in the house. Indianapolis. There are a million LS possibilities. That's right. 11 likes. There's more now. There's 23. But 81 people here. Do you know if the 4-hole LS throttle body will fit an M90? It's not the same as the one that's on there. Turbo John showed on a video a small block Chevy, 391 inches with 23-degree 220 airflow heads, unported with twin turbos, making 3,000 horsepower. Going 4.0s at... It takes 3,000 horsepower to run 4.0s at 190? I put a 75 millimeter AccuFab throttle body on my 331 small block Ford with AFR 185s and track heat. How much better than a 55? A pretty good bit more than a stock one. But I would argue that if you have a 331 that has 185s on it, and if you have some kind of cam in it, I would argue that a 75 is not big enough. Yeah, Robert, it was the question in the video is draw through, not blow through. We're on a 102 in my Cadillac. Escalade intake on 15 Engine Master by Porte opening for the 102. Had to nix the O-ring and make a gasket. Yeah, that's part of the problem with the 90 millimeter openings in the factory manifolds, is that you got to go past that O-ring sealing. And if you use like the paper gasket stuff, that's not a big deal. Or just don't worry about that for dyno testing. It doesn't really matter if we have a small leak or something. VP Racing offers an overwhelming array of fuels. Is there any chance in the future you would see what it's worth on fuels? Yeah, I would like to do it. I want to do a pump gas E85 and M1. M5 would also be cool. the guys from Westech, I think, have done that, and Engine Masters have done a fuel video. And it would depend on what we tested on. If we just tested on an LS, I don't think we're going to see very much. Well, if it's just an NA one, we're not going to see very much. My dad's motor for the 66 Chevy we had before he passed away had a 468. Big block Chevy Superman Classic, long tube headers, 98cc 427 heads. Were the 98cc, were they factory heads off a police car? Turbo John's a fun guy and shared most information while having a blast. True sportsman. Cool. I sent a contact request on the website for some parts a couple of days ago. Should I keep waiting? Why do you need a contact request? What is it? I don't see any messages from you. I'll have to ask Jimmy if he got one. But Dave, what is it? Or did you want to order something on the website? Did you have questions about something? I'll give you my email if you want to contact me if you're not getting contacted. I see all of the message requests from the website, and I answer all of them just like I do for the channel and stuff. 850 CFM with a high-rise single plane. We never got to start the motor, but it had Lanati 310, 320, 110, 550 left solid roller. I think the motor would have been 500 to 600, 550 to 630. That's a pretty big spread. I first put my 600 horsepower turbo 5.3 together. I had 102. I switched back to a 98. The car was way more streetable and not an on-off switch. The bigger throttle body can be like that. Zoo Truck, what's up? I messaged you on Facebook with a long message about the big block. Okay, so Zoo Truck, here's my recommendation. Ask your questions one at a time. Don't ask 15 of them in a row. Let's invent a variable length runner intake manifold. That's already been done a whole bunch by the factory stuff. Too hard to predict. Degree of taper, laminar flow, eddy currents, not wanted, straight shot, or gradual turns. What's too hard to predict on the throttle body? It's not hard at all because all of those things remain the same. Lunchbox wagon, Colorado. How much boost versus how much flow? The more restricted flow doesn't make power, but makes big boost number. Isn't always power. Sounds like eighth mile. That I'm sure that was an eighth mile. 4.0 is going to be an eighth mile deal, but I just didn't realize it took 3,000 horsepower to get there. Please put baby powder on your head so it's not so shiny. Add ethanol to oxygenate the fuel. Let's see, E85 versus 90% nitro and 10% methanol. It's a pretty good mix. That should mean that we would increase the power output by 90%. Can I use a marine motor in a car? Yes. I'll send you photos of my M104 turbo. Eric, what's going on? Looking for the best cam springs injectors for my application. So Dave, just tell me what motor you have and how much power you want to make and what you're trying to do with it. And then we can give you what you need. Edward, off topic. So people know there's no topic anymore. I just had the discussion that I had. And then now for the questions, you can ask whatever questions that you want. For mostly street cars, it better for a torque converter stall to be higher or lower than the resulting RPM after a shift. After the transmission shifts, you should not be anywhere near the torque converter stall number anyways. The torque converter should be much lower to than wherever your shift RPM is if you're going wide open throttle. I don't know how many gears you have. I mean, unless the only way that might be possible is if you had a 2-speed power glide or something. Got a stock 302, shorty headers, X pipe, Edelbrock Performer intake, 65. Is the throttle body big enough? Do you have a camshaft in it? And the throttle body is probably big enough as long as the opening in that intake manifold is still 65. Because otherwise you're going to have to port the intake manifold to put a bigger throttle body on it. Shadow Ops. I don't think I've ever smoke tested one. If you smoke test one going into the intake track, it's going to go out the exhaust if a valve is open. Answer yes in terms of restriction, but is it a better throttle control? Probably not. 70% methanol, 30% nitro is a more containable mix. Yeah, that seems more. I mean, we would start at 5 or 10 or something. Have you done 100 versus 87 octane on the dyno? I don't think you would. You couldn't run the same amount of timing on 87 that you would be able to run with any fuel that has more octane in it. So the fuel itself is not going to change the power, but certainly the amount of timing is. If you can run full timing on 87, when we've tested 87 versus like 91 or 93, there's no power. Sometimes there's a small gain in power from 100, but the 100 that we use is oxygenated and not like the aviation fuel, which I don't use at anything. The E85 definitely gains power on boosted applications. We don't see a big change on a lot of these lower compression NA motors, but it does add power. It certainly adds power out on the street, like guys with LT motors and Coyotes, where they have enough compression, where they're also knock limited. They can't run full timing. And then when you put E85 in it and you can run full timing, you can definitely make more power with the E85 stuff. But when we can run full timing on the engine dyno with a naturally aspirated deal where we're running 29 degrees or 30 degrees of timing on like an LS motor, that's already all the timing that the motor wants. If we add E85 to it, adding more timing doesn't do anything. It doesn't make more power with the added timing. And so we would only be relying on the change in caloric content, basically, of the E85. And there just usually isn't a big change in power from that. There is a big change when we add boost to the equation. Steve Morris ran 5 something in the 8th with 3,600 pound wagon with his SMX engine, claims 300 horsepower. Used out if 5,000 full boost potential. 2012 5.3 LS cylinder 1, spark plug full of oil. Cylinder wall looked okay. If you're getting oil in, it's either a guide or a seal normally. .351 Cleveland. Phytech is making very loud noises at 170 degrees engine temp. Check for vacuum leaks, but nothing found. Any idea what would cause this? It's not the IAC tube. I don't know what you mean by making noise. Is it making a whistling noise like there's a leak somewhere? Is it making detonation noises? Like what kind of noises is it making? Well, 3 heads cam, 12.5-to-1 compression. How to get more power out of the motor? What intake do you have? And what cam do you have? I've tested if a bell mouth improves power. It did. In fact, the video that I just put up, we did a bell mouth test. And when we do bell mouth tests on turbos and on blowers, it certainly helps because a bell mouth does improve airflow. So just like with the throttle body, if you're in a situation where improving the airflow adds power because it's airflow restricted, then it definitely adds power. Because the bell mouth, it usually improves the flow rate of whatever you're testing it on. Zoo Truck, with the Edelbrock TR2X intake manifold have performed similar to the intake manifolds you tested in the 540 big block stroker? It would probably do similar to the Wyand intake manifold that we tested, but probably not as good as the Dart, and certainly not as good as the ported Dart if we did the ported one in that. Tom, what's going on? being that I already have the long intake runners from a tunnel ram, do you think having 1 or 2 inch spacers under the cars would give me power gains from increasing the plenum volume? I don't know. Spacers are kind of hit and miss. For tunnel rams, I would have to test them to see. There's not an always that it does yes and always that it does no. When guys bring in tunnel ram stuff and when they're really looking for power, they do a lot of things. They do port stuffing, not ports, but plenum stuffing. They do spacers. They do isolators. They do carb adapters, not adapters, but carb spacers. So there's no way to know unless you test it. And anybody that's telling you that it will do it or it won't do it doesn't know unless they've tested your exact combination on the dyno and then did a back-to-back test on what we're talking about. That would be the only way to really know. A lot of times we have to put spacers on the tunnel rams and sometimes on the blowers as well, just to get the throttle linkage, not to hit stuff. And we're doing that out of necessity more than anything else. Just a smoke test through the PCV line. So you're not going into the intake tract then. Just trying to chase a vacuum leak. I did it the other night with engine running, spraying. Spray. This motor's on the spray. No idle, I clean the throttle body. Replace the gasket in spite of having no idle change. On a Lubbock truck cam 5.3, would you even bother with an intake manifold or just go straight to a turbo kit? I don't think the only way that I would change the intake manifold is if I was trying to get more NA power. If eventually you're going to go to a turbo, I wouldn't even worry about that. I would just save the money because it's not really going to benefit you. The turbo, particularly with that cam in a 5.3, you got springs on it, you're going to add a turbo. You're going to add a turbo that you can get all of that turbo out of it with all of the stuff that you have. So I don't think I'd worry about it. Most tunnel rams don't need more plenum volume. Often they need less to get the accelerator pump shot and the cylinders faster. Yeah, and guys do that. That's like I said. Sometimes they're stuffing those to fill dead areas, change the plenum volume. 1,100 horsepower, 4 strikes, or just quarter mile in the low 3s. 5.3 with the BTR stage 2 cam. What size throttle body do you recommend? The size throttle body I recommend is the one that matches your intake manifold. What intake manifold do you have, and what's the opening in the intake manifold? You should put that size throttle body on it. Found my problem running lean. It was my fuel pump. When I installed the new engine, the old pump didn't work. I could only get a stock pump. I put a gauge on the fuel line, dropping down to 3 psi. That will make a difference. I'm glad you found it, man. Stock intake non-ported and TSP Honey Badger. Thanks for all your work. Happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, to everybody too. And I'll still be on here tomorrow. Got a Vortec 5.7 transplant into a 70 Monte Carlo. Okay, so it's not an LS, right? It's like an L31. This will be my daily work. Can I get info on transplanting the TBI system into the Monte Carlo with a 4L60? I don't know. You have to go online and take a look for swaps on that. Because I don't know about the harnesses and that stuff. It's particularly that specific one. Simon, 234, 239, 115, 618, MI 408 single 98 millimeter turbo motor with LS3 heads and manifold. Do you think this cam will do okay in this motor, or should I go bigger? Yeah, are you trying to max out the 98 millimeter turbo? I would think that that's enough cam to do that. Do you have stock LS3 heads? Because I think that you would be getting to the limit of a stock block or stock head thickness with a turbo like that. That turbo will make a lot of power. I said electronic shooting earmuffs are useful around a running performance style V8. What are the gains of having multiple throttle bodies like on a Mustang or Porsche? Well, are you talking about having two of them, or are you talking about having individual throttle bodies for one, like one for each cylinder? Dan asked the same question. Everybody has a safe Thanksgiving. I'm looking at possibly up to 6 inches of snow. Uh-oh. Have a stock intake, but I'm upgrading to a Holley low ram. So the low ram has 105 millimeter opening. So that's what I would put on it. A 105 or 102. Just got my 6.2 back. What's a good cam to make 650 to 700 horsepower NA? You're not going to do that. The only one, I don't know if I've ever seen a 6.2 LS motor make 700 horsepower. I've seen LT motors do that. And if you did, it would be really, really high RPM kind of thing. Simon goals are 1,500 horsepower, CNC LS3 head, stock LC 8 block, billet crank, and I-beams. How are you putting LS3 heads on a, is an LC8 block is that a 5.3 block? Now I'm confused. Unless an LC8 is not what I think it is. Oh, it's a 6-liter. Okay. Never mind. You're good. You knew what you were doing. Billet crank, 4 rods and pistons. So the block is going to be your limitation there. And now are the LS3 heads stock? And I mean, not if they're ported, but are they stock? Are they the stock deck thickness is the thing I'm concerned about. Richard, because of you, I'm putting a 350 out of my mid-engine setup VW bay window bus. Oh, very cool. Second truck Norse equipped 5.3. That's it. What year is the bus? The double Dutch bus. Even with CNC heads, the CNC heads would be a given, but most guys with particularly a stock bottom end LS3 that doesn't have 4 rods and pistons in it with valve release, so you can put a really big camshaft in it. Most of them are going to be like at 600 or low 600s. So the LS heads are very similar to the Super Cobra Jet heads. Not at all the same. CNC heads and boost. Yeah, yeah, you could get there. Yeah, how much easier you could get there with like 4 or 5 pounds of boost. Aftermath, thank you. Number 2, assuming I select the same camshaft you ran in the video and that the Dart Pro 1 heads flow the same as the Brodix, I'm curious. Yeah, I don't know if flow is the only indicator. Well, it's not. I don't know that flow is the only indicator of power. I'd have to go back and look and see when I did the rec port head test if we tested those Brodix heads. I doubt it because I don't remember testing anything that would have been a 363 in that group. But if Brodix knows how to make heads, and if those heads are what I'm thinking that they are, they should make as much power maybe as the Dart Pro ones. The Dart Pro ones, the 335s, are good heads. Stock mechanical pump is rated at 23 gallons an hour at 6 psi. My old pump was 25 at 7.5. Found another pump rated at 30 gallons and 7 psi, $2 more than the second one. I think I'd spend the $2. You don't have a Holley Blue pump on it? How much of a difference would compression ratio make? I'm scrolling. I've tested, you say the motor is 8.8 to 1, mine's 10.5. Each point of compression is 3 to 4% change in power. Video of the V16 Bugatti on a test drive just dropped. Oh, cool. Yes, they are. I got them as part of the deal. If I lift them too often, I'll go aftermarket. Yeah, I think that's probably going to be your limiting factor. Was curious why engineers use multiple throttle bodies. Porsche, I think, has one for each cylinder on their Boxer, and Mustang, I think, just has two. Seem to be only on high performance engines. The individual cylinder thing is common in race cars and racy cars. They do that for throttle response, which does help if you get the throttle blade down close to the valve. They're also doing it so that they can, well, I mean, they could get the runner length. I would be surprised that people would do that anymore, given what they could do with different connectors between the plenums and sliding runner lengths and all that stuff. Richard, should I be close to 600 wheel horsepower NA off the bottle with my 13-to-1 404 stroker, 7,500 RPM Frankenstein boost plus heads, 262, 282 nitrous cam, Holley high ram, 85. Yeah, 13-to-1. Yeah, I would think so. Those heads probably flow pretty well. I don't think the high ram is the most powerful manifold that you can get for that, but that should be close. 1974 bay window bus. I couldn't cut up one of my split window buses. I know, I do like those. Those the like 13 window buses and stuff, those things are money now. I mean, that's like, those are like serious money. What's the most you've made out of a 5.3 NA? The only one I've ever done is a stock bottom end junkyard motor that we made 540 out of it. It made 542 or something, just with the heads, cam, and intake manifold on it. And we're limited in camshaft because we have this, the whole stock bottom end, the stock piston that has no valve release in it. I learned mass flow is more efficient than increasing the velocity of the flow because the fluid needs more kinetic energy to go faster versus just having more fluid. Okay. Did you learn that one of those has more oxygen molecules than the other one? Tried upping the idle RPM. I have a Holley red pump. Okay, for the nitrogen system, mechanical pump has always worked, and I tried one, kept burning it out. Okay. Australia's in the house. Okay, Z truck number 4. I haven't seen where you've tested different piston ring gaps. I have tested ring gaps. I've tested on the 5.3 that we did ring gap on before we added a boost to it. We ran it with the ring gap that it had from the wrecking yard, and then we ran it after I put a whole bunch of ring gap in it on one of the big bang motors, and it didn't have any change in power from the ring gap. I've only ever run one set of gapless rings. I don't know that a gapless ring is necessarily going to have more power than a small gap because the gaps are overlapping on the rings anyways. So I don't know if power is getting by there. And this, people don't realize how fast this is happening. But I haven't tested the thing exactly that you're saying. Porsche doesn't use ITBs anymore. They do use VarioRAM. Yeah. A question on the L98 you turboed. What turbo was used? You said it was a whole set. I think it was a 70 millimeter whole set, if I remember right. But there's a lot of good turbos out there. If the GT45 turbo that we use on everything, like the inexpensive one, would be a perfect turbo for that, because it will easily make. I think we only made like 600 horsepower or something, so it'll easily do that. Manifold you recommend for the 404 combo? That's EFI and going to be spraying 300 plus shot of nitrous as well as the drag strip. The that Brian Tooley Trinity intake manifold makes more than the high ram does, but it does it at a higher engine speed, and so that there is trade-off there. I don't know that I've run a 13-to-1 motor like that. I'd have to go back and look at all of the data on the 415 that I ran for the LS3 stuff and see which one of those maybe had the best average power curve. I'm thinking that the performance design one might have been kind of a winner with that. Do you have information on Hemi engines? No, I'm not an LS guy. I'm an engine guy. So I wrote books on Hondas and Ford Focuses, and I wrote a book on Hemis. All of it. So I've done most of the Hemi testing that I did was on the earlier ones, but I have done Hemi testing as well. Is a sloppy stage 2 a good choice for my 98 LS1 Camaro? Depends on what you're trying to get done with it. Varioram is a $600 set of pin rings worth money, or could I just reduce the friction depending on? Wait a minute. Oh, I got retracted. I heard you like high cars. I do. Hayabusa swap to Suzuki Cappuccino. Nice. Made it dry sump. Paddle shift. That is kind of awesome. That's super awesome. Now it has power too. That would be a lot of power. That would be ridiculous. I do like those little cars. I think that they're very cool. In fact, the book that I wrote on the B segment cars, like the Fit and the Yaris and all those, I wanted it to be on the class cars. It would have been hard because I don't have access to a bunch of them, and I didn't own one, whereas I owned a lot of the B segment cars. But I think it would have been cooler. My van feels faster with this new Soundstream amplifier. There you go. The right stereo makes it cool. Is a $600 set of piston rings worth the money, or can you just gain extra power by reducing friction with a thinner set of rings? A thinner set of rings is going to be a little more difficult unless you are also getting pistons that are designed for that thinner set of rings. What are you trying to do? First of all, I wouldn't put a really expensive set of piston rings in a junkyard LS, which is normally the kinds that I would put together. So I don't do that. We reuse the stock ones, or we put a set of not very expensive ring sets in there. What's your favorite car? I don't have one. My favorite engines that I test is whatever the next one is. And if I had to pick a favorite car, it probably would be a McLaren F1. Sean, happy to help. I haven't bought an intake yet, so I'm looking into the PTR, the Trinity. Yep. Is it Cuppicino? The Cappuccino? That's good, cup of Joe. Have you considered selling a plain label throttle body similar to War Performance without the name on the top, or Holly that we can buy from the store? You mean an LS throttle body? I haven't looked into throttle bodies at all, mostly because they don't recommend them very often. Like on turbo stuff, which is kind of what most people are like the LS guys are looking at. I tell them to keep the stock stuff, But if there were something that was a reasonable price, but it would also have to have quality too. What's the power difference between a 408 and a 416? Well, you could just do it based off of the specific output. So if you're making 1.5 horsepower per cubic inch, it's just 8 more cubic inches. Is ring gap around 28 for boost? Yes, that's where I put it. And I do it on both rings. I do it on the top and the bottom, not on the oil ring. The oil ring just needs to have usually a minimum of about 15. Just the minimum, bare minimum. Just the facts, man. That's right. Dragnet. Dragnet in the house. Just starting the chassis on my 9th S10 build. Got a turbo. I don't know what the LAMIK is. 8 HP 70. Also bought a Challenger in case I go. CAN bus on the first one. LS2 or LS3 street truck SCCA. Okay. Have you made any videos on tuning? I've made videos that show you what happens when you don't have the right tune. Meaning I've showed you what happens when you have, like on an LS, when you have 29 degrees of timing, but also what happens when you have 27 or 25 or 22 or not enough timing. And then also what happens when you're running your NA motor at 13 to 1, 12 to 1, 11 to 1, 10 to 1. On some of these, I've gone even down to 9 to 1, just to show you what happens, but not how to tune your combination, but what happens when it's not right. And also I've done the timing sweeps on, I have videos up on doing timing sweeps on turbo motors and what effect that has. And then also air fuel stuff. How much ring gap would you say is good for a 400 or 500 bore that will cruise around lots and spray? 300, 350 shot when that Corvette wants to pick on you. I would do 6 to 6.5 per inch of bore. Could you do a 4G63 to see what it makes on an engine dyno? Would be awesome. I do like those. I've run those on chassis dynos, but not on engine dyno. Oh, B&R cured his lifter tick with a different kind of oil. Night Raven 8 wants to know how reverse works in your motorcycle trans thing. I know, I want to see it too. Look, it sounds cool. Terry, yeah, did you see that was my point, is the photo that I used for the video that I put up on the throttle body was actually photos that I had from the V12. Did you see the email I sent on 350 mile per gallon Nova 2 on HHO system? That was probably a month or two ago. I don't remember seeing that. Do you think 102 millimeter throttle body on a 5.3 with LSXR 205 heads and a 222, 226 will be too large for part throttle drivability? No, I don't think so. I think it's fine. W40 is good European spec. Do you always get the rings at 90 degrees to the bore surface? Or are there times when you scarf cut them? I'm not familiar with that. When I'm measuring ring gap, we put the ring at the same spot. And what we do is I usually use a piston with a ring in it, or we have a tool that we use that pushes the ring down to the right spot, depending on what the bore size is, because we got a bunch of those. And so we just put it down the same spot every time. And then I just reach down on the tool that we have from Total Seal and just grab it and make sure the ring is all square. And then you measure it and then cut it and put it back in, put it in the same spot and measure it. So is a limit of a cam what makes the power, or is it a combination of different things? I can see 525, 600 lifts, etc., but does it actually equate to more power? Lift doesn't always equate to more power. Duration does, but it's not one thing in a camshaft. It's the valve events that are happening, and then they work in conjunction. Like I said, it's a big dynamic equation. Those work in conjunction with the head flow, the average head flow, the intake design, the runner length. All of these things combine together to make this dynamic equation work. Have you ever ordered from Rock Auto? I have. I haven't seen them changing the warehouse and changing the pricing on me, though. I don't think I've had that happen. I don't buy stuff from them a lot, but I haven't seen that happen. When the 454 Gen 6 idled rougher, the lifters ticked. So when they made noise, so you think the noise was actually the lifter and not something else? So maybe the cure to lifter tick is an oil change and a type change. That would be cool if there was a way to cure that. Walmart actually had some common oil filters for several dollars cheaper. Walmart online. ARP studs, check the torque, and they're 70 foot-pounds. Yeah, that's more than enough. It's all good. Put my Christmas lights up today. I'm excited. Got my video up. Doing a live feed. It's just all a good day, man. Need D16 filters. Do you have panel filters? The stock panel filter in there? I want to build an engine, but I want to actually understand what I'm building, not just copying and pasting. If you're building your first engine, it's much better to copy and paste because then you get experience. And if you do it the way that somebody has already done it, you still get the experience of doing it yourself and understanding it and also not making a mistake while you're doing it. I think that's probably a better way to go. My TR2X is different port sizes to compensate for the good bad ports on the old big block Chevy heads with modern heads. Is the difference still needed, or should I port the intake to make it even? I think you're looking at like diminishing returns from that stuff. Do you need a value release piston for your cam, the low buck truck? Do we need a valve release? We don't. The low buck truck cam shaft with any factory LS motor has plenty of piston to valve clearance. I was walking into a Ferrari dealership when I paid for the Motorcraft 5W50. I know I had to buy, I went to everywhere online. I went to 4 different auto parts stores to try to get windshield wipers for my wife's Mercedes, and it was a dealer only piece. And they were $75. Did you get anything for Black Friday week for yourself? I haven't bought any Black Friday stuff. What oil would you recommend for turbo motor? I'm going to have worked over pretty good. I usually run Penrite. I haven't even heard of that. Wonder if I'd be better running a mineral over synthetic. I don't think so. If you had any experience or tested the Monster M311 heads, I have not. When I was doing all of the testing, most of the testing, Frankenstein wasn't even in business. So most of the tests that you see are from a long, long time ago. So they weren't even part of the equation. And also, I don't know that I've had, if you look at the tests that I've run on stuff, I don't test, other than doing the LS test when I did all of the heads for the LS stuff, the Frankenstein head wasn't available at that time. That was the only time where we ever did like 800 horsepower NA stuff. 302 water pump, broken bolt, use a welder to extract. Yeah, because it's probably going to be it's definitely going to be rusted in there. That's the problem with those. Where is it broken? Is it broken in the block? That's normally the place. Sometimes it gets rusty if it's in the water pump itself, then you're fine. I just snap it off and pull it out, and then work on getting the bolt out if you can grab the bolt out of the block. But usually they break off below flush into the block, and then it takes a little bit to get them out because then they're rusted in there. Bobby, happy to help. Any harm stressing over missed sales and money? And I don't have to spend on a junkyard motor being up all night. That's right. Racing oils, are they worth the extra money? Valvoline VR, I think 2050. If I could get a deal on an AMC 258 cam, I'd think about it. I'd like to run an AMC. Question is, does an LS need all the zinc? No, it doesn't. Unless you plan on running a flat tap in it. Flush snap, I'm worried about it will break again. They're gonna take off the timing cover. Yeah. Is it flush with the timing cover, or is it flush in the block? Because don't the water pump bolts go down into the block? If you've done an oil PSI test, changing oil PSI with bearing clearances instead of viscosity, motor making 45 PSI versus 80. We've done oil pump tests that do that, but not a bearing clearance test, because a bearing clearance test wouldn't just be oil pressure. A bearing clearance test would also be bearing clearances, which would be a different thing. And more oil pressure requires more power. So there is power consumption in oil pressure. If you look at a race motor, like a cup motor or something, Dan could probably tell you, they don't have very much oil pressure. They only have the amount of oil pressure that they need, which is almost nothing when they're idling, and they don't idle very much. Flush with the water pump, last bolt, just head snapped off. Okay, well, you're probably okay. Then you probably could get that out. I thought VR1 was the go-to oil for turbo cars. Sure, put in whatever you want. I've never run it on any turbo motor that I've ever run. We've run lots of Lucas stuff. I've run whatever cheap oil there is at the or at the auto parts store. We've run Rotella once or twice, but not very often. Some of the driven oil. I don't know if I don't think I've put Mobil 1 in there. We may have run Royal Purple, I think. Try blending oil for horsepower and a big bang motor. Use a strange combination of oil. VW bus guy again. Cool. I got to figure out what the 5.3 I have is. It's been a while. I think it was a 2014 or 2012 half ton. It has to be 243 heads in aluminum block. It only has 120,000 miles on it. So does it have a weird oil pan on it? I don't think it's a 2012. Is it an LC9 maybe? No, that's earlier. An LH6 maybe? An LH9. What year was that? That went to 2012. An LH9. Is VS Racing any good? I've had nothing but good luck. I think Viron's a good guy. Matt from Sloppy has used a bunch of his stuff. I've had nothing but good luck on all the stuff that I've tried of his. Don't know about LSs. We modify the old Mercedes. They need ZDP and thicker oil than most people are aware of. Factory manual from 89 calls for a 2050. Are they flat tappet cams? I mean, those are going to be overhead cam motors, right? We'd run 40-ish at 8,800 and even less during qualifying. Oil pressure was almost zero at idle. We're using 3 piston squirters per cylinder. And those are dry sumps though, right, Dan? Amazon has 10-volt stick welders for under $60. Will they work for hot side tailgate EV turbo plumbing? I would think. I'd never tried one. I've never tried stick welding. I've only done the wire feed stuff. Are the different colors of those fancy oils gimmicks? They're really marketing to identify it. That's an additive package that they're doing to it. It's a dye. 416 stroker, trick flow, 220 head, fast. I still need to pick a camshaft and piston design, but I want 500 wheel horsepower. Okay, so that's 600 flywheel. That shouldn't be too hard. It's going to have to be a pretty good sized cam. Look at the BTR Stage 4 LS3 camshaft. Lifter trays, genuine or aftermarket. BTR has some good ones, some aftermarket ones, or get the GM ones. There's a lot of Amazon ones that are out there that are not good. '78 Camaro I got had a 327 Bird 30 over. Those a 333. Have you ever played with one of those? Not a 333. I take that back. The 327 that I tested, I think, was 30 over. So yeah, I've done. There's videos up on that. I did an L76, which is a 365 horse 327, and then an L84, which is the fuel injected version of that, which is a 375 horse 327. And then we put airflow research heads on it and tried cams on it and did other things with the 327, because I did a DZ302 and then those versions of the 327, and then also the LT1 350. And then we also did the hydraulic cam versions of that. So we did the L79, which is the 350 horse 327. And then we did the L46, which is a 350 horse 350. And then, like I said, the LT1, and then the 302. And then we did a whole bunch of stuff to the 302 where we made over 500 horsepower with it. Dry sump with adjustment screw on the outside for pressure stages. Easy to change them. The only good Royal Purple is $16 a quart. Man, that's a lot. I'll check in tomorrow. Once you take apart an 800,000 mile Mercedes, you'll never want an RB or a 2J again. What does a stock Mercedes that motor, whatever 103 or 104 is, what is it? How much power does it make? And are they all naturally aspirated? None of them are turbocharged from the factory? All store shelf oil by law can only have 800 parts per million. Those welds won't work the next day. Wish I got lucky and had the 302. Heard it can make pretty good power. It made the same. The 302 and the 327 and the 350, the LT1, all made about the same peak power. It's just the bigger motors make a lot more average power. Why would you run less compression in a turbo motor versus NA? I don't know what you mean by less. Would you want to run higher compression? Trying to figure out the reason that people put lower compression when they're adding boost in is because they're octane limited. So if you're running pump gas, you get more power with a given detonation threshold with boost than you do with static compression. So it's a better trade-off for that way. And then that's what most people do, because you don't have an unlimited amount of octane. Simon, all right, we'll see you later. Mercedes 6-cylinder engine, 158 to 188 horsepower. Okay, so it's not very stout to begin with. Tick racing cams, haven't seen any video shot. I've run tick cams before. We ran some with the sloppy stage 2 versus the world, and I'm trying to think. I thought we ran something else. Kind of sends me a message. Must be identical to a sloppy cam. You just have to look at the specs on it and see. We ever ran the Edelbrock the Carter style carburetors? We have, yeah. Versus an equal size Holley carburetor. The Holley carburetor is going to make more power. What's E85 limit for compression if boost? That's not a thing. That's you can't have that question because there are too many other variables. How much timing do you have? What's the air intake temperature? What's the intercooler? What's the water temperature? How long are you under boost? All of these things. M104 was around 200. Did you ever do the China sloppy cams? No, I never have. I think Elgin did the sloppy stage 2 cams. Elgin is the one who's made those, and I think that those are US cams. All of the other ones that people have, I don't think that I would try because I've seen a lot of really bad stuff. Isn't higher compression, smaller tuning window a thing? Yeah, it is. As you go up in static compression, you get much closer to detonation. That's what I was saying. Is it you come down in compression, static compression, and then you can go up and boost, and the trade-off is much better that way with a given detonation threshold. What compression would you recommend on a ProCharge 416? I don't have enough information there. I need to know what gas what kind of fuel you're running in it, what you're using it for, how much power you want to make, what pressure is, do you have an intercooler, all of that stuff. Richard, what's your email? I'll send you the max speeding photos on the M104. Why does max speeding photo, why do they have a photo of an M104? Is it because they used one of their turbos on one of those? I have a 3-quart 10W30 roll purple. Have an AVS, would like an AVS2, more control of the secondary opening. I've run those as dual quads on stuff before. I think that's what I had for the, maybe that's what we had on the Hemi. We use their turbos on the latest build. Okay. Those guys reached out to me. I think they're going to be sending me some stuff again. I've used their GT3582s before. Is water to air intercooler a big advantage to a front mount? And does using both work even better? Anything that you could do to lower the charge temperature is beneficial. So an air to water can ultimately do that better than an air to air can because you can put ice in water and make the transfer medium much colder than ambient. And an air to air is only ever going to get too ambient and probably is never going to get too ambient. So you can get more cooling that way. But do you want to have, you can't carry around ice all the time. So for normal street driving, they both work well. Purpose built, yours will be the last question. We're going to shut our poll off at 74% saying no. So they think that the blower one will add more power, and they're right. Vanilla 6, I was looking for big cams considering a Tsunami V2, 235, 240. But after watching your sloppy cam comparison, I'm thinking a sloppy stage 3. Yeah, I don't know how that TSP cam compares to the sloppy stage 3. The sloppy stage 3 worked okay. The sloppy stage 3 didn't make as much power as the BTR stage 4 LS3 camshaft. Big Gen 1 CTSV. So that's not a blower motor though, right? LS6, okay. Have you tried the new Hollyish? The new VRS Edelbrock carburetor is excellent. it's probably the best thing out there right now. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you all for showing up. I will be back tomorrow. If you haven't, please go take a look at the video that I put up today. And also visit richardholdnerperformance.com for your LS performance needs. We've got a Black Friday sale going on, like 10% off stuff. So go check that out.